Hello, everybody. Welcome to the History Valley podcast. Today, Dr. Scott Stripling joins us to discuss his find at Mount Ebal. So I'm just going to give this introduction, and then we'll get started. Scott Stripling is the Director of Excavations for the Associates for Biblical Research at Ancient Shiloh from 2017 to present. He also serves as Provost and Director of the Archaeology Institute at the Bible Seminary in Katy, Texas. Previously, Stripling directed the ABR excavations at Khirbet el-Maqatir, served as Field Supervisor at el-Hammam in Jordan, and as a supervisor of the Temple Mount Sifting Project in Jerusalem. Stripling did his graduate studies at the University of Texas, which is where he got his Master's of Arts degree, Assemblies of God Theological Seminary, which is where he got another Master's of Arts degree, and Veritas International University, which is where he got his Ph.D. Stripling serves as Vice President of the Board of Directors of the Near East Archaeological Society and has published widely in peer-reviewed journals, popular magazines, and books. He is a popular speaker at churches and conferences around the world and a guest on numerous television programs and documentaries such as Fox News, The 700 Club, the New York Times, Trinity Broadcasting Network, History Channel, and the Discovery Channel. His passion is connecting the material culture of the Holy Land with the biblical text. Dr. Stripling recently discovered an artifact at Mount Ebal that contains an inscription that bears the name of the Jewish God and is now known to bear the oldest inscription with the name Yahweh inscribed upon it. And it says, "Cursed, cursed, cursed, cursed by the God Yahweh. You will be cursed. Cursed, you will surely die. Cursed by Yahweh, cursed, cursed, cursed." For those who don't know, in Deuteronomy 11:29, Mount Ebal is known as a place of curses. So tell us, Dr. Stripling, what were the exact circumstances that led you to discover this inscription? And then after that, tell us, when does this inscription date? And what do you think are the significance of this find?
Hi, Jacob. Thanks for having me on your program. We, in December 2019, took a team, the old dump piles that Adam Zeptal had left behind in the 1980s. From 82 to 89, he excavated at the site. And with our new wet sifting technology, we were able to recover a number of things that he did not get in his excavation. Most importantly and most interestingly was a small folded lead tablet that we would call a defixio, or a curse tablet. And using tomographic scanning, we were able to recover the text from the inside of that tablet. So in a nutshell, that's what the project was, and that's what we recovered.
I was reading in the Times of Israel's article on your find, and it states that some academics have stated that the fact that they are publishing it in the news before being published scientifically is a bit off, one of them said. Another cautioned that since he hasn't been able to view the inscription himself, it was impossible to know whether the claims were factual or a case of overdeveloped imagination. How would you respond to such criticism?
Well, first of all, who are these academics that they think that they get to determine how others publish their finds? You know, it's not like there's some set rule that everybody has to do things the same way. There were reasons that we chose to do it the way that we did, and we're in the process of peer review and publishing scientifically. So I would just say that I don't remember who that scholar was in the Times of Israel, but you'll just have to wait a few more months to see the actual scans.
Do you think this artifact could potentially lead to the discovery of others down the line that would vindicate the biblical account of Joshua, including other stories told in the Old Testament? I ask because in Deuteronomy 27, it says that Joshua built an altar at Mount Ebal. So do you think it's possible that the inscription is connected at all to that account?
Oh, absolutely, it's connected. I have no doubt about it. The proto-alphabetic script dates to the late Bronze II period, and most likely all the way back to the time of Joshua. Now, if we were to go through the rest of the dump pile, because we only sifted 30%, if we did the rest of it and we found other tablets, other curse inscriptions, then that would lead me to believe that maybe these were individuals who were leaving these as part of their covenant renewal. But if there's only one in the entire dump, then that leads me to believe that this was sort of a titular head. Somebody on behalf of the nation had inscribed this, and it was a national covenantal document.
Does this suggest to you as well that the writings in the Old Testament could potentially, some of them, including the Torah, could they potentially date earlier, since I know it's been discussed that now with this artifact having been found, this is strong evidence of early Israelite literacy, much earlier than academics previously thought?
Yes, I think that's exactly right. We have been divided in the scholarly community between those who believe that there was a very early composition of the Pentateuch and even the Hexateuch, and those who don't. And this certainly lends credence to the view that it was written at an early date. There was the ability to write it with a phonetic script. There was a literacy that existed. So it's at the right place, at the right time, and it has the right stuff.
How do you feel about the authorship of the Torah? Do you think it's potentially authentic?
Well, yes, I agree with Jesus. Jesus said that Moses wrote the Torah, and I agree with Jesus.
Yeah, because I know that in your
that might drive some of my colleagues crazy, but that's just the way it is. I think that the weight of evidence supports that. We have a very, very early date here, and we have other texts. We have the Ketef Hinnom silver scrolls from the 7th century. We have the Pithoi from Kunti Lerajrud with portions of Exodus and Numbers on that, and now that's in the 8th century. So the idea that the text was actually composed in the Hellenistic or Persian period, that's impossible. I mean, it may have been recopied or edited in those periods, but I don't think we can say with a straight face that it did not exist from an earlier time period.
So from what you just said, I assume you think that the book of Joshua is also authentic. Do you think that the historical Joshua wrote that?
I don't know if Joshua wrote the book of Joshua. It's about Joshua. That doesn't mean that he necessarily wrote it. In fact, his death is recorded at the end. So, I doubt that he wrote about his own death. But are the events authentic? Are they historical? Is there a realia? Is there a verisimilitude? Yes, and that's what this tablet speaks to. Joshua 8:30 says that Joshua built an altar on Mount Ebal. That altar on Mount Ebal has been found. It's a round 2x2 altar, that 2x2 meter altar that is protected and venerated by a later rectangular altar. And this curse tablet came from that altar, and the text, the dating epigraphically of that text goes back to the time of Joshua. So if you're looking for a synchronism, I think we found it.
Speaking on the book of Joshua, writing about Joshua's death, that takes me to this other question I planned on asking. The Talmud says at the end of Deuteronomy, when it talks about Moses' death, that Moses did not write the end of Deuteronomy, that Joshua wrote that. How do you feel about that claim?
I don't know. It's possible. I don't have enough evidence to say yes or no, but I am aware that the Talmud says that, and it's possible. I think Joshua must have been literate because God told him on Mount Ebal to plaster stones, take flat stones, cover them with plaster, and write the words of the law on them. So you can't tell someone to write something if he's not literate. So he certainly would have had the ability to do so. But again, you can see that I'm presuppositionally approaching these narratives are historically accurate. I think some scholars are approaching them with a hermeneutic of suspicion, maybe, that there are. So we have some different presuppositions in play. So what I would urge those on my side of the aisle and those on the other side of the aisle to do is let's focus on the evidence. What do we have in this text, and how does that impact our presuppositions?
In the book, 5 Views on the Exodus, Historicity, Chronology, and Theological Implications, you talk about the book of Exodus taking place in the 15th century BCE, which is an earlier time than what is usually than the Exodus is usually dated. What led you to you concluding that?
Sure. Well, I wrote chapter 1 for 5 Views on the Exodus, Zondervan's latest text in their Counterpoint series, And I wrote about the biblical date or the early date of the Exodus. And I half the chapter I dealt with the textual issues, the other half I dealt with the archaeological issues. So textually, we would begin with 1 Kings 6:1, 480 years before the building of Solomon's temple, the Israelites exited from Egypt. And we have a universal agreement on the year of the building of Solomon's temple. So when we take 966, 967, and add 480 years, that puts us in 1446, or the mid-15th century BC. We have other passages that synchronize with that, like Judges 11:26, where Jephthah, in about the year 1100, tells the king of Ammon, when they're having a border dispute, that my people have already been in this land for 300 years. If you had a dispute, why didn't you raise it sooner? And there are others, but I think those two are probably would suffice for now, that there is a biblical rationale for why we would go to the late 15th century BC or early 14th century BC. It's kind of that LB1B, LB2A horizon. Archaeologically, there's also an abundance of evidence of when sites are destroyed. And so I deal with Jericho, I deal with I deal with Hatzor. We look at evidence from Egypt, like at Tel el-Daba, where you have a Semitic population that is at Tel el-Daba in the Delta region at Goshen, and then they abandon. There's an abandonment phase, which just happens to fall in the mid-15th century BC. So you've got a Semitic group, and then they disappear in the mid-15th century. That's something that we have to consider. We have something called the Soleb hieroglyph down in Nubia, and it mentions on this inscription the land of the Shasu of Yahweh. Now, there's only one people group in the ancient world that worships Yahweh, and that's the Israelites. And this means that in the mid-14th century, this is Amenhotep III, in the mid-14th century, there was already a land where people who worship Yahweh lived. That simply does not work for the late date of the Exodus. It only works for an early date. So that just gives you sort of a flavor of the biblical rationale and the archaeological rationale.
A lot of the criticisms that's often given about the book of Joshua's account is that Jericho was already long destroyed by the time that Joshua and Moses had left Egypt. But there are earlier sources about the destruction of Jericho. If I remember correctly, the destruction of Jericho was at one point attributed to the Hyksos or others in the early 2nd millennium BCE. How do you feel about that?
I think I understood you to say that some people attribute the Exodus to the Hyksos expulsion from Egypt. Is that correct?
I was talking about the destruction of Jericho, but I was also going to ask about that too.
Oh, okay. So the question is about the dating of Jericho's destruction?
Yes.
So again, we have City 4 at Jericho is kind of what everybody's trying to analyze and understand the destruction of that City 4. Was it in about 1550, as Kathleen Kenyon believed, or was it around 1400, as John Garstang and others have believed? And there's contradictory evidence. I mean, your carbon dates so far have pointed to an earlier date. Of course, there's always complications when you're dealing with carbon dating. Is it collected correctly? Is it calibrated correctly? And so forth. If you've got wood samples, for example, that you're using for carbon dating, that can only tell us when the tree was cut down, not when the destruction occurred, and so forth. But the ceramic dating and other indicators seem to point to that biblical date. So this is what there's a lot of conflict about at Jericho, still raging. Others would talk about City 5 at Jericho, and in the new excavations, Lorenzo Negro has evidence of a late Bronze Age city at Jericho, no doubt about it, even a late Bronze Age city wall there. And so another paradigm would be if you take the Septuagint reading of 1 Kings 6:1, which says there were 440 years, not 480 years, and the Samaritan Pentateuch takes this gives this date as well, then you take 40 years off of that, and then that puts you into that City 5 at Jericho. So it's a complicated issue. We've got multiple dating metrics, and we've got City 4 and City 5. I'm confident that it did not happen around 1550, back in the Middle Bronze Age, which is what a lot of people believe happened.
So that takes me to my other question. How do you feel about the Hyksos identification to the Exodus story? Josephus and against Apion made... I was just going to say real quick, Josephus and against Apion made this claim that the Hyksos are their forefathers, and later authors have taken that literally. So what are your thoughts?
That's a great question. What do the Hyksos have to do, if anything, with the Exodus? So the Hyksos expulsion from Egypt predates the biblical Exodus by at least 100 years. And Josephus conflates the two events. He's citing an Egyptian historian named Manetho in the 3rd century BC. He's a Ptolemaic historian, and he conflates the two accounts. And I spell that out in my chapter so that folks can clearly see how he's conflating those two. The chronologies are different. They're two separate events. The Hyksos expulsion is one thing, in my view, and the Israelite Exodus is another event.
How do you feel about those that claim that Adam didn't exist, that Adam is lifted, including Noah as well, out of the Mesopotamian myths, the Mesopotamian flood myth, like the Epic of Gilgamesh or the Epic of Atrahasis, or that Adam is based on the Sumerian Adapa, who is punished by being cast from heaven and put down back to earth because he didn't accept the waters and bread of immortality.
I think I understood you to ask what I thought about the Gilgamesh epic and the possible synchronisms between Adam and Noah. Is that correct?
Adam and Adapa, and as well as the Sumerian hero Zeus Sudra with Noah, because of the apparent similarities.
Yeah, I don't have really a lot of opinion or insight on that. I certainly could discuss the Gilgamesh epic with you, and how it synchronizes with the Noah account. But as far as that area, you're out of my area of expertise as an archaeologist.
So do you think Noah was a historical figure, or what do you think this guy was or do you think this particular guy could have been influenced by the Mesopotamian flood myths?
Okay, and now these are opinions. We're no longer dealing with archaeological, testable scientific material. But
Sure.
You're asking about my opinion. Yes, I do believe that Noah was a real person, and I do believe that there was a massive flood in the ancient world, and I think that flood is reflected in at least 300 flood myths in cultures around the world, including the Gilgamesh epic.
So returning to the topic of the archaeology at Mount Ebal, are excavations continuing there now to see if they can find more artifacts connected to the one discovered recently?
It's a problematic process because since the Oslo Accords, Mount Ebal is sort of in a no man's land, and so to do an excavation there, things are going to have to change politically. It's going to have to move. The line's going to have to move one way or the other. So this is why what we have done is not excavation. We're dealing with the trash that was left behind from the excavation in the 1980s when it was not in disputed territory. This is before the Oslo Accords, and this was, with licenses to do it. So until things change politically, I don't think we can do excavation, but hopefully we'll be able to sift more of the dump pile.
Is there any work taking place elsewhere besides that you can talk about?
We are excavating at Shiloh. I started in 2017, and we will be back in the field this summer, having missed the last 2 years because of the worldwide health crisis. But yes, we have a large team excavating at Shiloh, and we have about 10 more years of work planned there.
So how long do you think it could be before work can continue at Mount Ebal?
Well, the publication I hope to have wrapped up by the end of the summer, but it's possible that it'll drag on maybe to the end of the year. Sometimes the deeper you go into research, you find rabbit holes, and it becomes a protracted process. But hopefully, no more than 6 months down the road, we'll have the academic peer-reviewed publication out. And as far as additional work, that will depend on a lot of things. If we have funding, we would like to go back and do some more sifting. But as far as technical archaeological excavation, that's going to require a peace process, and that's beyond my pay grade.
Going back to the chronology, just as you were talking about the Exodus happening earlier in time than the standard chronology suggests, do you think similar chronological differences exist in other parts of the Old Testament, or is it just consolidated to the Exodus story?
Good point. Well, in archaeology, principle number one is we go from the known to the unknown. So when we get fixed points, like the building of Solomon's temple in 967, and then with 1 Kings 6:1 and Judges 11:26, then that can give us another fixed date, say in 1446. Then we can fit the other dates relatively around that. We can, obviously Abraham is before that, and then, we can see where David would fit in just before Solomon. So we can build a pretty solid chronology of the Old Testament. It's a little trickier when we get back to the patriarchal period, but I think we're really on solid ground, at least up through the time of the Exodus.
And my last question for you is, do you think eventually scholars will change their mind on the way they think about the Old Testament right now, saying that Adam, Joshua, and all these other guys didn't exist, as these finds continue to unfold?
Yes, I think that a lot of people are fair-minded. In fact, we tend to be divided into about three camps. We have those who have a proclivity toward agnosticism and skepticism toward the text. We have about 1/3 who have a proclivity toward maximalism, if you will. And then we have about 1/3 that are in the middle that are persuadable by evidence. And I do think that as things like this text are published properly and publicized properly, and there will no doubt be more in the future, that we will see a broader acceptance of the historicity of the text.
Well, thank you for joining me, Dr. Scott Stripling. It's been a pleasure. And I would definitely like to, at some point, if you would, to do another show with you to dive deeper into the 5 views of the Exodus and focus specifically on that.
That'd be great. Thank you for having me on today, and I apologize for the technical glitches, but hopefully it comes out somewhat coherent.
Oh yes, I think it all worked very nicely. Hello viewers, thanks for watching this video from the History Valley YouTube channel. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell, and if any of you wish to further support this channel, please consider checking out this channel's Patreon page and becoming a patron, and or donate through PayPal or through Super Chat during a live stream. Thank you.